Hello and welcome to Hafen City Live. My name is Lewis and today I'm joined by Dave Bell from the ancient Roman city of Gloucester in England.
Hi Lewis, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, Dave. In today's programme, Dave will be telling us all about the dark side of Hamburg and the Hafen City, and also taking us on a trip back in time through history. Dave, I can't wait. Do tell us more.
Well, coming from a country rich in history and a city founded by the Romans, I have always wanted to know more about the lives and times behind Hamburg. Having grown from a tiny castle village of about 500 people in 808 AD, the now thriving port city of Hamburg has a population of nearly 2 million and is seen as the capital of northern Germany.
That's right, it certainly is. Dave used the word thriving here. We use the word to thrive to describe a situation of extreme success, for example in a city or an economy which is doing financially well. So, tell us more about Hamburg's history, Dave. How did the modern Hafen City come to be how it is today?
Well, that's a very good question, Lewis. I decided to check out the Hafen City and was pleased to find an area with a very long history. I found a captivating mix of buildings and warehouses, new and old, revealing a picture of centuries of thriving industry.
Sounds exciting. What do you mean by captivating, Dave?
We use the word captivating to describe something very interesting that attracts and holds our attention.
I see. So a very exciting book, a film, or an exciting football match could be captivating, for example.
Yes, exactly. And the Hafen City's many bridges, canals, walk and waterways certainly captivate the interest and tell their own story of Hamburg's growth and importance of a port city, as well as the global influences on Hamburg over the years.
So where did you decide to visit next?
Well, I'd heard of the many museums and places to see in the Hafen City, but where to go? Maybe to one of the museums where I could learn of the importance of the harbour, smugglers, pirates, and the history that accompanies any port city?
Oh, spoilt for choice. But where did you eventually choose, Dave?
Well, it was as I was happily walking along the Mattenvita Bridge that I saw something else that captivated me. Just in front of me was the Hamburg dungeon. It was time to explore the darker side of Hamburg.
Oh, wow, that sounds exciting.
Very exciting. I paid the entrance fee and posed for the welcome photo with my head in the stocks. That's a medieval punishment device, which my girlfriend seemed very happy about.
Oh dear, that's not very nice.
That's what I thought too. After that, we were taken in an old elevator by a witch with a shrill and painful laugh. It wasn't long until we were introduced to some of the torture instruments of the dungeon, namely the claw, the tongue tearer, and the jaw breaker.
Oh, they sound painful. You used the word torture there, Dave. To torture means to cause extreme pain to someone, especially as a punishment for doing something wrong. That must have been really frightening.
Yes, it was. But thankfully they didn't torture us and I got out alive.
I'm glad to hear it. So, who did they use these terrible torture instruments on?
These terrible instruments were used on inhabitants of Hamburg Dungeon throughout the Middle Ages as a punishment.
Oh, I can imagine that was really painful.
Yes, I can imagine it was. After that, we moved on to explore more of the dungeon, and we learned more about some of the other events that have helped to shape Hamburg over the years.
Dave said here that these events helped to shape Hamburg. By this he means they formed the history, and they had a very strong influence on how Hamburg is today.
Yes, exactly that. Some important events that shaped the history of Hamburg were the two great fires in 1284 and 1842, which almost completely destroyed the city, and several disastrous floods that ruined large areas of the city.
That's really interesting. What do you mean by disastrous, Dave?
I'm glad you asked, Lewis. Here, disastrous, used as an adjective, comes from the word disaster. In this case, the flooding disaster.
I see.
And if something is disastrous, it has an extremely bad effect on a situation.
Ah, so you could say, for example, that the financial crisis was disastrous for many countries' economies in Europe.
That's a great example, Lewis. That's exactly right. After that, the next disaster to hit Hamburg was the Great Plague, or Black Death, which struck the city in 1350 and killed nearly 60% of the inhabitants.
60%? Gosh, that's awful.
Yes, an amazing amount. We also heard the tale of Klaus Störtebeker, a notorious 14th and 15th century pirate. Evading capture for years, he was eventually caught off the German coast and sentenced to death.
Oh, pirates. What do you mean by the notorious Störtebeker, Dave?
If someone is notorious, they are very well known by a lot of people, usually for the bad things they have done.
I see. So you could also say that the Bild-Zeitung newspaper in Germany is notorious for its sensationalist journalism and, of course, its naked ladies.
Indeed you could, Lewis. Well, at his execution, the notorious Störtebeker made a deal. However many of his crew that his headless body could walk past after being executed would be freed. The legend goes that 11 of his men were cut loose and saved.
11? That's amazing. But I can't believe it's true.
Well, who knows? It's one of the many myths that surround the history of Hamburg. A myth is a story that is not proven to be true or is very unlikely to be true.
Great example. So, Dave, tell us, is it a myth that the Hamburg dungeon is a great place to discover the events that shaped the history of Hamburg?
Ah, well, that is not a myth, Lewis. We all agreed that the Hamburg dungeon was an informative and most entertaining afternoon out. So, if you want to know more about the darker side of Hamburg's 1200 years of history in just 90 minutes, then I suggest you go down to the Hafen City for a look around. Who knows what you might uncover?
That's a fantastic tip. I might just do that. And thanks, Dave, for that captivating experience.
The pleasure was all mine, Lewis.
Great. So let's just recap the vocabulary we heard in today's podcast. We heard
to thrive,
to captivate,
to torture,
to shape,
disastrous,
notorious,
and finally we heard the word myth.
Well, that's all we've got time for today at Hafen City Live. Until the next time, it's goodbye from us at Institute for Languages. Goodbye.
Goodbye.